Yeah, I mean, it's something we usually talk about at the beginning. Nothing special. You would have heard about it, I think, if it was anything special. Yeah, no, who could blame you for after that game? I mean, that was something to say. That was what I watched. I had the basketball games on my computer on League Pass, but I was mostly watching the baseball game. That's what was on the TV.
I watched no sports last night. It was great.
Really? What'd you do?
Binge The Watcher.
Oh, all right, there you go. Good. I've heard it's good.
It's different.
Okay.
Like, it's worth watching. It's
yeah, it seemed like the one that everybody's into this week, or this last 2 weeks or whatever. So it's definitely on my list to check out. That house is like right over here too. It's North Jersey.
Yeah.
So it's like
yeah, they use like the actual address.
Oh, really? That's cool. I'm sure the people
different house. The house they used actually is in Westchester, where Ben lives. But
okay.
Yeah, they use like the actual address of the house.
Right. I'm sure people are driving by that like crazy now.
Yeah.
Good morning, Stokastic NBA fans. Welcome to the NBA strategy show for October. I almost said December. October 29th. We're not that far into the year yet. October 29th. It's Saturday. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. That means that my brain is still asleep in the other room on the couch. But I'm here with Adam Scherer, and he's going to take us through all the ins and outs of the NBA slate tonight. We've got a 6-gamer loaded up. It looks like an interesting slate. A couple really big totals, but a couple really big game lines as well. So it's going to be an interesting one to go through. 6-gamer probably won't get us in trouble at the end of the show where we've got to rush through the last couple of games like we did last Saturday. So nice casual convo going through. But start us out, Adam. How's your week going? How'd you do NBA last night? What's going on?
Didn't do great, which was kind of the theme of the week, but actually didn't quite get my lineups in before lock. So I ended up with, on DraftKings, 100% Banchero, which was cool.
Okay.
100% Wagner, which was not. And then just, late, then I just late swapped around everything else. But
yeah.
It meant that I didn't have any Trae Young there. I didn't have any Cade. So put myself in a hole early. Didn't have any Dennis Smith Jr., which was cool. But it was like a normal, lose 40% type night.
Yeah. It was an interesting one for me. I didn't end up with enough. Who the hell was it? From the his name's escaping me all of a sudden. From the Sixers, the guy who stepped in. No, Melton. Didn't end up with enough of him. He had a decent game. I avoided the Bull spot. I avoided the Damian Jones to a decent amount, and just didn't get over the top. It was a similar kind of night to like what you had. It just didn't have the pieces come together in the end. Had a couple chasers early, but didn't quite get there. And then you were spending your night. Go ahead.
No, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I spent most of my evening watching mostly the World Series game that we were just talking about with Mikey. You were watching the Watchers, so missed a little bit of maybe some of the ins and outs of the NBA, but I think we're pretty much on top of things that went on last night. And any overarching thoughts as we're taking a look at this slate? I mentioned the 3 games that could potentially blow out. We've got 3 pretty decent-sized spreads, a couple decent-sized game totals. Anything really stand out to you?
I was laughing at Doug in chat because he said Adam had 100% Devontae Graham and shipped. I think it was literally like a year ago yesterday that I did that. It was the same sort of thing. Like I just didn't quite get lineups in. Ended up with it was 100% Devontae Graham, 100% OG Anunoby, and they both just went nuts, and I won. But yeah, it would have been great if it was just like the same thing, obviously. But it wasn't.
Right,
As far as tonight though, 6-game slate, so obviously you have to dig a little bit deeper. It's not. Yesterday was pretty much just like if you don't really like somebody, you don't need to play them. Yesterday was also really difficult just because there wasn't a lot of value. Even once value started to open up after lock with, DeAnthony Melton, with Damian Jones, who, obviously was really popular, it still became really difficult to get to guys like Giannis and, the true pay up options. And it actually turned out exactly like Josh and I talked about too, where Giannis scores like 65, 66 DraftKings points and it's just like completely unnecessary on that slate at that price. Tonight, with it being a shorter slate, I do think we actually probably end up with a little bit more value with Ja Morant being doubtful. That's just going to open up a lot from Memphis in a variety of ways. But yeah, it looks like a pretty interesting slate, I think.
Yeah, that's a big spot that's standing out early on our board as you look at the boom bust tools. Assuming we get no Ja, those guys are going to be key value pieces. And I agree. I think it makes the lineup constructions just come together a little bit easier. And I think we've maybe got a little bit broader of a mid range to work with today too, in terms of some of these 6s and 7s. So should be an interesting slate to look at lineup combinations. We're brought to you today by PrizePicks, guys. So make sure you're checking out PrizePicks. We'll talk about them in a little bit. Make sure you hit the like button down there, the subscribe, all that good stuff helps us out quite a bit. Helps you know when the shows go live and all of those good things. So make sure you're doing that for us. We've got a BetMGM no-brainer bet up for the NBA. It's one of those bet $10 on any money line, and if anybody hits a three-pointer, you win $200. We'll talk a little bit more detail about that, but I wanted to throw it up on the table for everybody at the beginning of the show here. So like, subscribe, hit the BetMGM thing, hit PrizePicks. We're going to dive on into this slate, and we're going to talk first about the Golden State Warriors, 9-point favorites going into Charlotte. One of the bigger totals on the board, 233.5. Start us out with the Golden State side of things, Adam. Both sides of the game, it looks like these guys are kind of projecting and rating out in terms of probability, as a lot of these guys are who they are. There's a couple fairly high-end star caliber players. There's a couple, premium rotation pieces, but nobody's really popping through in terms of our probability numbers. They all just kind of look like they usually do. Anything standing out to you from Golden State?
No, I mean, I think you're right. It's just a team that we're going to get normal rotations, or at least right now we expect to get normal rotations. Steph Curry's been very good this year. That shouldn't really surprise anybody, but 1.54 DraftKings points per minute for Steph, 30.5% usage rate. He is what he is. He's not getting a ton of ownership today. He's a little bit more expensive than I would like for his medium projection, but he still gives you that massive ceiling. Andrew Wiggins has been good this year. His price tag has also come up a bit. He's sitting at 7,100 on DraftKings, small forward only. I think that's fine. He's pulling like 9% ownership. That seems about correct. He's rebounding well with a 12% rebounding percentage, has a 21.5% usage rate, which is fifth on the team, fourth amongst non-James Wiseman pieces, but he's averaging 1.2 DraftKings points per minute. That's likely to come down, but you are still likely to see him between like 1 and 1.1 fantasy points per minute probably. So he looks okay. Draymond is the same thing Draymond has been for as long as I can remember. Jordan Poole, high upside scorer at 5,900 off the bench. The issue is that you have the volatility of somebody that's playing like 28 to 30 minutes in a lot of games. So there's not one guy here that really stands out to me as a clear priority. Klay Thompson's price tag is down to 5,400, which is pretty nice. He could start seeing, a little bit more playing time. Kerr said that he's going to. I also never totally trust Steve Kerr when he says things, but it is likely that you see that ramped up a bit. He did play 29 minutes last game, so Kerr kept his word there. He hasn't been good this year, and obviously he's coming back from injury. But at the same time, this is like the perfect example of one of those players where, maybe there is a little bit of extenuating circumstances because of the injury, but he's averaging 0.87 DraftKings points per minute this year on 47% true shooting. 0.87 DraftKings points per minute at 5,400 if you're going to play around 30 minutes isn't that bad. Mm-hmm. And then he's not going to shoot 47% for that much longer. It's going to turn around eventually, so he's another example of, you don't want to get my favorite spot to target in tournaments. And he's not really low owned today, so he doesn't totally apply here. But when you get guys who are low owned because they're shooting poorly and their price is dropping at the same time, that's like my favorite thing to target in DFS tournaments. You're getting 2 out of the 3 here. A poor shooting Klay Thompson, a falling price. He is getting the ownership that he deserves, but certainly, worth a mention at 5,400.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a guy like that you can see the price does not necessarily fit the player outside of this recent performance, right? Something that we can always target in DFS in a lot of situations. And yeah, that's one that stands out just because of who Klay Thompson has been through his career and how he can shoot, how he can, even if it's not a consistent Klay for this year and he's maybe he never gets back to who he was, I do still think we get those games and we can pick him off for DFS purposes where he goes out and knocks down a bunch of threes and he is the Klay of old for a night.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and the gap between, because he very well may not get back to what he was, but the gap between peak Klay Thompson and 47% true shooting Klay Thompson is very, very wide. We can settle on a middle ground here, and 5,400 is still going to be too cheap at that middle ground.
Yeah, still have a very nice player at that price. Just looking site to site, it looks like Klay getting a little bit more value on the DK board at 54. He's 57 on the FanDuel slate, shooting guard, small forward. And the one I wanted to point out was Draymond looks a little bit more valuable on FanDuel because he picks Wiggins looks a little bit more valuable on FanDuel because he picks up power forward eligibility on FanDuel. He's 7,500 versus 71 over on DK, but he's getting a little bit more optimal rate. He's in our tools and he's slightly positively leveraged, basically efficient ownership. Nothing that stands out, but I did want to call out that he does pick up that multi-position, gives him a little bit more tiny fraction of an inch of optimal lineup ability there. Any love for anybody coming off the bench or any of the depth pieces here? Anything to call out for value potential? If somebody sits, anybody that you're interested in, anything like that?
Not really. I mean, you have a $4,300 price tag on both Kevon Looney and James Wiseman. They're both low owned. If like you have to get to one of them, fine. Looney played 29 minutes last game, which was interesting to see. Wiseman played 14 off the bench. Wiseman's a very good point per minute guy. Looney's closer to a fantasy point per minute. Zero point 0.9 to a fantasy point per minute, whereas Weissman's over a fantasy point per minute. I don't think either one's overly necessary. And, as a result, Looney projected for 7% ownership, Weissman projected for 1. But if Looney does play 28 to 30 minutes again, he's going to look pretty good at that price.
Yeah, makes some sense. Looking at the other side, definitely some interesting question marks with Cody Martin, Terry Rozier, both still questionable. They've missed a couple of games each. Not sure if you've got a read on them. Looks like we're projecting them both in right now. Terry Rozier, full complement of 33 minutes. Cody Martin picking up 17 minutes. Rozier looks interesting. Right now, we're not projecting for any ownership, so don't buy into the leverage number if you're looking at our tools right now, again, because that ownership will probably go up if he's confirmed in, and the leverage will even out. But it does look like he's picking up a pretty strong optimal rate, boom score probability. So with Rozier in mind, and then any other pieces from the Charlotte side of things, what are you seeing on their end?
Yeah, so something from Charlotte's going to be interesting. It's just a matter of what. Haven't seen anything on Terry Rozier here. Obviously, he missed yesterday's game, but that could just be, well, we don't want to bring him back on a back-to-back, so we're going to send him out one more game. Or it could be he's hurt and he's not playing today either. Still hurt and he's not playing today either. I don't know. If Rozier plays at 7,900, I agree with you that ownership's going to come up from 1%, but he is going to look good here. Golden State is playing at a very, very fast pace this year. Rozier without LaMelo Ball, just has the offense run through him. He's relatively expensive at 7,900, but he's going to look like a good option. And then similarly, if he is out, you go right back to Dennis Smith Jr. at 6,300. He disappointed yesterday. That shouldn't really deter you, though. Like, that's just what Dennis Smith Jr. is. If he were a guy that could consistently go out there and produce, he wouldn't be bouncing around from team to team and not getting rotation minutes outside of injuries. So he's a good fantasy producer, averaging around 1 fantasy point per minute for his career, but he's going to just have some dud games like he did yesterday. Price tag didn't move, still 6,300. If Rozier's out, I'm fine going right back to Dennis Smith Jr. Of course, pay attention to the ownership there. But then also, if Rozier is out, it's going to make Gordon Hayward look better. Supposedly, it makes Kelly Oubre look better, but he's just been doing absolutely nothing for the last couple of games. But his rate should go up. He should produce more fantasy points than he has. So if Rozier's in, I think it's kind of Rozier being number one, and then you can get to some Hayward, take some shots on Oubre if you want to. But if Rozier's out, then we're back to what we've been doing the last few days, where you kind of get that, for lack of a better word, big three with Rozier, Hayward, and Oubre.
Makes sense. With assuming no Rozier, if we're looking at DSJ again, I know 63, he makes some sense on the DK board, of course. But like taking everything that you just said about him into account, the streakiness, but the potential for some production at 69 on FanDuel, point guard only. Are you still interested at that price, that positioning?
Yeah, still interested. Like, I just assume he'll get a little bit less ownership there, which is going to offset the cost a little bit. FanDuel lately has had a little bit softer pricing than DraftKings, so
Yep.
I would think that the opportunity cost is probably a little bit higher on FanDuel as well, in addition to the real cost. So probably drives down the ownership a little bit, and it just ends up being a trade-off where you're not getting the same sort of value, but you're also getting a lower owned player.
Makes sense. And then if we're missing, say, both Rozier and Cody Martin, any love for like a value guy like Book Knight for 3,600 on FanDuel, 37 on DK? Is he going to see enough time in that kind of a situation?
I don't think we're going to need that on this slate. He played 26 minutes yesterday, but that was a game where they were just getting their asses kicked by Orlando. So he played the final 17 minutes of the game. I wouldn't read into that. In the first half, he played about 9 minutes. I expect that you're getting 16 to 18 minutes from him. If it ends up that you're just like starved for value and you absolutely need a $3,700 guy, like Book Knight at least has the potential to score fantasy points, but
Right.
I certainly don't expect anywhere close to the playing time we got last night.
Okay. All right. Makes sense. So yeah, maybe bottom of the barrel value where, hey, I paid 3,600. I'm buying maybe 18 minutes from a guy who maybe could give me some fantasy points. Anything else from this one before we move on?
Nope.
All right, let's take a look what's next up on the run sheet. Indiana, 10-point dogs going into Brooklyn. Another one of the big totals, the two big totals coming off the board up top here, 236.5 in this one. Let me jump back to this sheet. Let's start on the away side. Let's talk about the Pacers first here. Tyrese Halliburton off the top of the board, definitely an interesting piece for me. Looks like Isaiah Jackson is picking up a big leverage score. Not sure, do we have a injury question mark on Jackson?
I don't know why he's. No,
Yeah.
I mean, but I don't know why he's.
Yeah, that just popped to 15.3% optimal, 2.5% on to 12 leverage score on FanDuel, 10.6 to 1.4 on DK. So that might get cleaned up. Not exactly sure what's creating that massive drop in ownership there, but
I think we just have Jackson over projected right now.
That might also make some sense. So that would drive down the optimal rate then if you guys are looking at that. So that'll get cleaned up as we go. A lot of time before lock, certainly. But what are you liking? A lot of moving parts on the indie side of things, but outside of Halliburton, like nobody really to me stands out above a lot of the other guys who just kind of mix and match pieces.
So there are a couple.
I would say.
There are a couple of interesting things here. So for one, with regard to Isaiah Jackson, and this is not why we have him projected high because we have Miles Turner in, but do keep an eye on Miles Turner's status. It is a back-to-back for Indiana. He did play 32 minutes yesterday. So if Turner were to get ruled out on the second half of a back-to-back, then Jackson would look good. But for now, assuming Turner is in, he played 32 and a half minutes yesterday. That is really good to see. In his first game back, he had played 24 or 25 minutes. I had projected him for a few more minutes yesterday. I certainly didn't go to 32, but it's good to see that because Turner is a solid point per minute fantasy producer. His price tag's actually falling. He's down to 5,500 on DraftKings. As a result, he's projected for 18% ownership, but this is somebody that can just get it done in a variety of ways. He gives you block upside, which is nice in terms of volatility in tournaments. He can score a bit, not the best rebounder, but still going to get some. So at 5,500, if he's good to go, he's going to look pretty good. Jalen Smith's price tag fell $500 since yesterday. He's down to 5,400, pulling 26% ownership. As long as he can avoid foul trouble, I'm pretty comfortable giving him 30 minutes on a nightly basis. He played 31 last night, and he's a solid rebounder, 1.1 fantasy point per minute guy. I don't think playing alongside Miles Turner really hurts him because Turner's not a great rebounder, so you can still get some production from Jalen Smith in that regard as well. So both of those guys seeing falling price tags is interesting. Buddy Hield always gives you a pretty high ceiling at 5,500, just going to be scoring dependent. And then you have Tyrese Halliburton at 8,300, who's just been fantastic this year. Yeah. And it's always kind of difficult to prioritize him because there are just always high upside plays around 8,300, but he's just been really good. He's also playing more minutes recently, which I don't totally trust because it's the Pacers and because we know that there's just going to be games where they run really annoying rotations this year. But early on in the year, even when he was playing well, we were seeing games where Halliburton was just landing at like 32 minutes. We've gotten 37 minutes and 36 minutes in his last couple. He's averaging just shy of 1.4 DraftKings points per minute this year, 26% usage rate, 46.5% assist percentage. Both of those numbers probably come down a little bit just as we get a larger sample, but this is clearly his offense, and he's going to look solid with this price tag, especially if he continues to play more minutes.
Yeah, and just been, like you said, just absolutely dynamite so far this season. 47.4 FanDuel points last night. To your point, Miles Turner, 55 FanDuel points last night. Just an outstanding performance out of him. I actually ended up with a decent amount of him. I've been getting to him. He's been coming up a lot for me. I'm curious to see how he does come up today because he's at 6,400 on the FanDuel slate, center and power forward. So different price point than over on DK. I love that 5,500 on him on DK.
Yeah, that power forward eligibility is huge, though.
Yeah. FanDuel's been really generous about center power forward eligibility with a lot of these guys. So you can put together some really interesting combinations.
DraftKings has been very stingy with their MPE so far, which I actually like. One of my biggest complaints about DraftKings NBA product over the last few years has been like they introduced MPE and then they just gave it to literally everybody. And so it was like, oh, well, I like this idea when you would give it to, like some players where it made sense, not every single guy. They've kind of gone back to probably being stricter than they should this year. And to me, that actually makes it more fun because you actually have to make more decisions.
Yeah, that's always going to be the better form of what we do here. And the form of the contest is the one where you're boxed in a little bit more. You've got to actually figure this stuff out rather than, hey, you got a little bit of money, you can play anybody wherever you want. Yeah,
and also for people that don't max enter, I believe that stricter MPE rules are much better for you in the sense that when everybody has MPE, I think it just strongly benefits anybody max entering because you're not like we're just saying, you're not really making decisions between, different players that look good. You're just making a bunch of lineups and fitting in all the guys that you really want. And so I think it just
covering a variety of the potential combinations that those people won't necessarily be able to get to rather than, hey, if I'm doing this, I'm excluding that those people might be able to have. So I think that's a strong point. Anything else from the indie side before we move on to Brooklyn?
I guess the obligatory mention that Benedict Mathurin shoots the ball a lot and has a nice ceiling, but his price tag is just kind of at a point where it's tough to get to him.
Yeah, 58 kind of in a no man's land on the FanDuel slate. 6,000 definitely in a no man's land. Shooting guard, small forward, at least on DK, but yeah, a little bit no man's landy there. Let's look at the Brooklyn side of things. If you're looking for movie recommendations, maybe don't listen to Kyrie Irving, but they certainly have some good basketball players on this team. Kevin Durant, Kyrie himself, the enigmatic and frustrating Ben Simmons. What are we doing with Brooklyn?
Yeah, so I didn't even see Kyrie's movie reference. I just saw Joe Tsai's tweet
Response?
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yesterday was weird. You had that, like the Nets owner kind of just calling out Kyrie on Twitter, and then the Josh Primo just getting waived out of nowhere. I'm really interested to see what he did. Has to be something.
Yeah, there's got to be something there, right?
It's got to be something really
bad. Out
bad.
of nowhere, yeah.
But yeah, yesterday was an interesting one from just an NBA drama standpoint. But as far as the Nets go, it's I think kind of just what we've been talking about all season. As long as all three of their main pieces are playing, Kevin Durant at 9,900 is always going to be a solid play. He's getting 21% ownership. Kyrie's getting 14% ownership at 9,500 coming off of a massive game. Those two are going to cut into each other on average, but you're still going to get plenty of games where Kyrie blows up or Durant blows up. 1.3 DraftKings points per minute so far this year for Durant with a 34.7% usage rate. 1.25 for Kyrie with a 32% usage rate. They both have assist percentages between 20 and 22%. They just look like really similar players right now. They're priced similarly. Durant's positional eligibility is probably a little bit better just because typically there's not as many good forward plays as there are guard options. Mm-hmm. Ben Simmons, obviously the very frustrating piece of these three. 6,400 point guard, small forward, still going to look decent on DraftKings. He's not been very productive this year, 0.83 DraftKings points per minute. But based on everything we know about Simmons, that's got to be like a floor for him. Maybe he does just do that all season long, but it's hard to think that he does worse than that. And it's more likely that he bounces back towards a fantasy point per minute. 13% usage, 11.5% rebounding percentage, does have a 31% assist percentage. Seemed like they were trying to get him going offensively a bit last game. I know the first possession of the game was a post up for Simmons that he scored, and it was like, oh, cool. Like maybe we're actually going to get Ben Simmons, looking like a competent offensive player, and then he still didn't. So
7 points.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, on the one hand, there's just not many guys in this price range that can give you triple doubles, and Simmons still has that in him. On the other hand, he is scared to play basketball.
It's such a weird situation. I do think that there's, even more value in him, though. And, I know people in chat are going to probably lose their minds. These guys recommend Ben Simmons every day, like we keep saying. But as like you were saying, a guy with that upside potential, we're seeing floor. We're seeing floor games from him. And I think there is a lot more potential, even if it's on any given slate, kind of like what we're talking about with Clay, where, yeah, maybe he never gets back to who Klay Thompson was. Maybe Ben Simmons never gets to the all-star caliber Ben Simmons, but he has the potential to go out and just rack up some counting stats, score a handful of points, and he'll have those upside games. Even in the clunker 30.6 FanDuel points, that's not useless. It's not what you want at 6,100, right, but it's not useless.
And he gives you defensive upside too, where there's a lot of volatility there. Simmons is certainly one of he's the type of player where on these slates where he's pulling 20, 25% ownership, I love just not really getting to Ben Simmons. And then on the ones where he's pulling 6, 7, 8% ownership, I'm happy to just play a bunch of him because I don't really know what to make of him. I do know that based on what he can do, he's underpriced. Based on what he's doing right now, he's a little bit overpriced. I don't know what it looks like 2 months from now. I think it's likely that he's producing at a higher rate by then than he is right now.
Yeah, totally agreed. And I do think there's value in the power forward eligibility over on FanDuel as well. That 6,100 price just makes him a little bit of an interesting piece, the ability to move him into that 4 spot. Anything else from the Nets? Any concerns on the blowout risk potential here? Anybody that you would think would maybe pick up a few additional minutes in the fourth in a blowout run?
Yeah, I mean, there is certainly blowout risk here. I don't really worry about it too much from the Nets side because if they're blowing out the Pacers, their stars are probably playing well. And then on the other side for Indiana, I don't really know that it has much of an impact, like as from a DFS standpoint. Obviously, you would prefer they not get blown out if you're playing guys like Miles Turner. Maybe Mathurin gets more run in a blowout, but like he also could just get a bunch of run down the stretch of a competitive game too. So, yeah, nothing I can really do DFS wise there. And that also goes to the first game. I mean, Golden State's a 10-point favorite at Charlotte. You could certainly end up with a blowout run there. Back to your James Bouknight question. He's someone where it's just like, yeah, if he's the last guy into my lineup, then I'm just hoping this game blows out. He does get his 26 minutes, but you're not going to like just play James Bouknight hoping this game blows out. That's
Right. Right. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. It's one of those ones where, like, if it trickled into the lineup and it was sitting there and the lineup had all its salary spent or whatever, then maybe I'm not taking it out. But yeah, maybe I'm not book night hunting, hoping for that blowout. Let's talk real quick, guys, before we go to the next game. BetMGM, no brainer. I mentioned it at the top of the show. This is free money. If I told you that Adam was outside your house with $200 and all you had to do was go outside and give him $10 and he would put $200 in your hand, you would go outside and do that 1,000 out of 1,000 times. Otherwise, I don't know what you're doing here. You're just wasting your time. This is the same idea. Go to BetMGM, create a new account, put $10 on any money line in the NBA. Somebody hits a three-pointer, which is going to happen. You get $200 for your $10. It's not too difficult to make that happen, guys. You can take that $200, you bet it on the NFL tomorrow, you really roll it up. Take advantage of these things. These guys are not going to be offering free money forever. Eventually, these sports books are going to be filled up to the capacity of customers that they want, and they're going to turn off the faucet. Go get that free money. Bet $10 at BetMGM on any NBA money line. If anybody hits a three, you get $200. Pretty easy. That's why we call it the no-brainer, guys. Not available in New York, Pennsylvania, Mississippi, or the province of Ontario. Must be a pregame money line bet. We should put a bunch of like disclaimers so we can do like the medicine commercial reads here at the end. Let's take a look, Adam, at the next one up on deck. That is, let me scroll back up here. The Philadelphia 76ers, close line on this one. 1 point favorites going into Chicago, 221 total. Obviously, big meatball in this one. Joel Embiid, the status of him. We saw him sit last night. I think the expectation was that he would go today, but definitely still a little bit of a question mark. I think, just dealing with some knee issues. Obviously, we've got Harris, Harden, the whole crew other than him. So any read on Embiid here? Any concerns about him? And then just what do we think on the Sixers?
My assumption is they were kind of just giving him a rest day on the first half of a back-to-back. I don't know. I will be concerned about him health-wise if he sits this one out too, because that means it was a legit injury. But I'm assuming they just didn't want him playing both. So assuming he's back, you're just back to what you've normally gotten from Philadelphia, where the Anthony Melton goes back to the bench, doesn't end up being a great value option. If Embiid is out, then he looks great, again, assuming he's starting. But also, obviously Embiid has an impact on everything else. James Harden was awful yesterday, but normally without Embiid, you're going to see an uptick in usage from Harden. We know he looks good one way or the other because the assist percentage is so high when Embiid is in, but Tyrese Maxey also sees more usage without Embiid. Tobias Harris sees more usage without Embiid. One thing that does stand out from Philadelphia is that Tyrese Maxey has very clearly separated himself from Tobias Harris in terms of who the third option on this team is, and that's as it should be. But going back to last year, you saw it a lot where Embiid was clearly the number one usage guy, Harden was number two, and then it was kind of just like Maxey and Harris splitting, being the third option. It is very, very clearly Tyrese Maxey this year.
And does that draw your attention to him? 7,200 point guard, shooting guard on FanDuel. Looks like 57 on DK. That's a massive difference. So I think a little bit more appeal on DK. What about on FanDuel at 72? Does he have appeal for you over there? Only pulling a 3.7% optimal rate compared to, it looks like well over 10 across town.
Yeah, I think it's tough on FanDuel at that price, assuming Embiid is in. Overall this year, 0.91 FanDuel points per minute for Maxey. He does play a ton of minutes as well. Like, you're going to get 38 minutes, give or take, from him in most games. On FanDuel, that still makes it pretty tough to get there at that price. On DraftKings, though, it makes him look really good at 5,700 because even accounting for the fact, assuming Embiid's in, that you're going to see a little bit of a drop-off in usage, you're just getting so many minutes from a guy that's averaging 0.95 DraftKings points per minute overall. Even if you cut that back to call it, 0.85 or 0.9, the guy's going to play 38 minutes at 5,700. He's just going to fall into fantasy points and look like a good value.
Yeah, at a certain point, that just maths out and adds up for you. Assuming, let's say Embiid doesn't go. Let's say we get the weird situation where he doesn't go. Anybody from the back end that steps in terms of the big men, Trez Harrell, a PJ Tucker, God forbid, in the starting lineup usually, but just doesn't really produce all that much. Any of those guys interested, or is it just kind of a skip spot on the Philly big men after that?
Yeah, based on the rotation they ran yesterday, I don't think there's too much that ends up being interesting. Like Melton would obviously look better. He's 4K. He played 30 to 31 minutes yesterday. Assuming he's back in the starting lineup if Embiid is out, he's going to look like a really good value option. But beyond that, they didn't really run a rotation that's super helpful for DFS because instead of giving a bunch more minutes to Montrezl Harrell or Paul Reed, they inserted Matisse Thybulle into the rotation, and he is god-awful from a fantasy standpoint. Actually scored 20 DraftKings points yesterday, but not something I'm going to count on from him in 22 minutes. But you still only got 17 and a half minutes from Harrell. 2 minutes of that was garbage time. You got 2 minutes from Paul Reed, which was all garbage time. Daniel House still only played 10 minutes. George Niang played 20 minutes. There just wasn't really, and that was also with PJ Tucker having some foul trouble and only playing 22 and a half minutes himself. So the rotation they ran yesterday didn't really open anything up for us from a DFS standpoint, other than Anthony Melton getting a bunch of minutes and then the increased usage for guys like Maxey, Harris, Harden.
Yeah. And the expectation, again, is probably that Embiid will be out there. It looks like he's drawing a little bit more ownership than his optimal rate on the FanDuel slate. Same story over on DK. Does that surprise you at all in terms of just the public, the perception of, maybe he was going to be out or any of that, or is just the public is sharp and people just follow what the sites tell them and the sites are expecting him to be in?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much the latter. One other thing, I guess, if he is out, this is a different matchup than yesterday. So maybe we do see Paul Reed starting, in which case Reed's going to be a really good value. You do have, a bigger front court here than you did yesterday with Toronto. So maybe they switch it up. I don't necessarily know that I don't know that they think Paul Reed or Montrezl Harrell is ever the answer. So I don't know if they switch it up or not. But maybe they do. Either way, like whoever is starting, whether it's Melton, Reed, Harrell, those guys are going to look like good values. Also, I guess like if Reed or Harrell started, it would be an indication to me that you're likely to get the other one playing the backup minutes as well. If they're just, looking to go bigger. But sure. That, obviously is all a moot point if Embiid plays. And if Embiid plays, he's going to look decent here. 1.36 DraftKings points per minute this year, certainly disappointing, but still has a 35% usage rate. He's relatively inexpensive at 10,200. I think it's reasonable to be somewhat concerned about his production so far, given that he might not be really in game shape yet. And then they did feel the need to rest him yesterday with his knee, but there is still plenty of upside for Embiid at this price as well.
Yep, absolutely. And also 97 over on FanDuel at center. So definitely some value there in the big man. Sub 10K Joel Embiid, sub 10K Kevin Durant on FanDuel today. Kind of interesting, just from a name value for price. On the other side, we've got the Bulls. Zach LaVine, I think we're expecting to go today. Did not play yesterday, if I'm remembering correctly. Didn't play Friday, but expected to play today. Any read on the LaVine situation? And then with let's take the scenario where Embiid happens to not play again. Does that lead you into shares of Vooch? Does that lead to any shares of Drummond as a potential value piece with limited minutes? What are you doing with the Chicago big men in both situations, I guess? And then what's your read on LaVine?
Yeah, so I think LaVine plays. The indication had been that they didn't want him playing both games of a back-to-back, and then he sat yesterday. The caveat is I have no idea what they're doing with Zach LaVine. I've been confused by him all season long. Started out the year resting for injury reasons, for injury management, came back, started playing pretty big minutes right out of the gate. So I don't totally understand what they're doing or know what they're doing, but I expect him to play today. And if he does, I'm expecting you get 35 minutes or so out of him. 7,700, he's going to look reasonable, especially only getting 4.5% ownership right now. Maybe that number comes up, but I do think that he's a reasonable tournament option at a pretty cheap price tag. For Vooch and DeRozan, it's kind of interesting that their prices fell a little bit. Vooch is down to 7,600. DeRozan's down to 8,600. Both of those guys clearly take a hit when LaVine comes back, and their prices had elevated as a result of him being out early in the year. But if Vooch is only going to be 7,600, even assuming LaVine plays, I think Vooch looks pretty interesting. Right now, he's only getting 5% ownership, 11% chance of being optimal. He's going to look better if Embiid's out. Like, I'm perfectly fine playing him if Embiid is in too. But if Embiid's out, you just get this situation kind of like we had with Nurk against Houston last night, where the Phillies are just kind of in no man's land, where Montrezl Harrell and Paul Reed aren't the answer to stopping Vooch either, but at least they have a little bit more size than PJ Tucker. Maybe they can rebound a little bit better, but Vooch is just going to destroy them, offensively. PJ Tucker is the better defender, but you're just going to be giving up a bunch of rebounds to Vooch. So it's kind of like a damned if you do, damned if you don't type spot if Embiid is out, and Vooch should just be able to smash either rebounding or scoring or both, depending on what they do. So I think he looks better if Embiid is out, but I think at 7,600, I'm interested one way or the other. Same thing goes for Drummond, 4,500. We've talked about him a lot this year, where if he's going to live at this $4,500 salary, he's always going to be a GPP option for me because, for one, if he just plays 16 to 18 minutes, he's going to have those games where he just gets there anyway at 4,500. But then any game where Vooch is in foul trouble or Chicago's second unit gets extra minutes for any reason, Drummond is just going to absolutely destroy this price tag.
Yep, absolutely. He's a standout. 47 on the FanDuel slate, and just looking at 44.8 FanDuel points in 22 and a half minutes the last time out. Vooch played 24 and a half minutes that game, put up 19. So, I mean, you just get that massive upside out of Drummond when he is on the court for whatever minutes that he gets. So, I definitely think there's appeal there.
Somebody asked about Kobe White. Assuming Zach LaVine is back, Kobe White will be sitting at the end of the bench.
Yep, there you go. We've got him projected right now at 12.4 minutes and a 0.1% probability of being optimal. That is not good. Everybody at the top of the board, though, for Chicago, positively leveraged on both sides, too. So, like the three, LaVine, DeRozan, Vooch, you could throw Drummond into that bag. You could throw Ayo into that bag as well. All those guys positively leveraged across both sites.
Do you remember, you might not know the answer because I know you're watching baseball. Dosunmu got hurt last night and went to the locker room. I think he came back. I'm not positive, but that is one piece to keep an eye on the injury report too.
Looks like he returned in the fourth. I didn't see that, but I'm reading the note here right now. Doesn't say anything about his availability going forward, but did return in the fourth.
Yeah, he came back. That's what I thought I remembered, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah. So definitely something to keep an eye on, though. Good call out there. Anything else from this one?
Nope.
All right, let's move on to we're in the middle of the show. Let me do that quick little discussion about our great sponsors, PrizePicks. Guys, you're probably familiar with PrizePicks from us doing so much talking about them, but it is a great site to go. It's daily prop-based contests. You're not playing against sharks. You're not playing against optimizers. You're not playing against mass entries. You're building a five entry card of prop picks. So you pick out your 5 favorite picks from the props pool. You put them onto your card. If you get them all right, up to 10 times, you win up to 10 times your entry fee. It's pretty good. If you're in a state where there's no prop betting, you're not allowed to bet on sports, and you like props, this is your site. This is a great place to go, game with props. We won't say bet, we'll say game. If you click the link in the description below, you can get 1 free month of Stokastic Plus Platinum and up to $100 deposit match bonus when you sign up and make a deposit over at PrizePicks. It is pretty killer over there. We've got great tools at the site too. We've got free betting tools that go through all the different props and give you the expected win rates. It makes it really easy to put these cards together at PrizePicks. Go check them out, prizepicks.com. It is a great, fun site to play. You can use your knowledge of multiple sports, and you can do cross-sport entries. So if there's something you like in baseball tonight, baseball pick, 3 basketball picks, and a hockey pick, boom, let's win 10 times our entry fee. It's that easy, guys. Go check them out, prizepicks.com. We'll talk about the Stokastic Hall of Fame in a little bit, but let's dive into the next game on deck here. That is the Atlanta Hawks, 5.5-point dogs going into Milwaukee. A decent total in this one, 228.5. What are we seeing from the Hawks side of this one, Adam?
Yeah, so I mean, it's an appealing team to get to just from a talent standpoint. Trae Young's pulling 13.5% ownership, 8% chance of being optimal at 9,700 on DraftKings. DeJounte Murray, 9,400, 8% chance of being 8% ownership, 9% chance of being optimal. He's been playing Murray, that is a ton of minutes this year. Yesterday, he played 32.5 minutes. That game ended up being a little bit of a blowout, but they did also seem to shorten his rotation a little bit on the front end of the back-to-back. But given that he only played 32 minutes yesterday, I wouldn't be surprised if you get him back to 38 or 39 minutes here. And that does make up for some of the relative lack of production between him and Trae Young. He has the lower usage rate, the lower assist percentage. He does rebound better. He does get a ton of defensive stats. So Murray is always a high upside option, as is Trae Young. 30+% usage rate for Young this year. I think it's like 32 or 33%. 34% usage rate for Young, 42% assist percentage, 1.4 DraftKings points per minute for Young, 1.2 for Murray. But again, Murray playing a couple more minutes on average than Young. So they're both going to look like low priority, but certainly strong tournament options. John Collins, only an 18% usage rate, but he is rebounding well at 16%. He's averaging a little over a fantasy point per minute. He's down to 6,600. I think he's kind of the third guy here.
Yeah, standout spot, I think, for Collins on the DK slate at that price. Looking at him on FanDuel, 7,700, a lot more expensive power forward center, drops him down to 6.8% optimal. Basically, takes almost 10 full optimal points away from him. He's positively leveraged over there, but I like the play way, way better on DK at that price. As far as Murray and Trae go, do you play them in the same lineup? Are you willing to do that? Or do you group them out?
So I don't group them out, but it typically just doesn't happen because neither one is showing up in that many lineups because they're just kind of like correctly priced guys. So like the chances of them getting in a bunch of lineups together is just really low anyway. But yeah, I don't group them out because they both just play huge minutes and they're both producing it's not a situation like they're going to close together. Obviously, they're going to play a bunch of minutes alongside each other. It's not a situation where one produces and the other doesn't. Murray's at 1.2 fantasy points per minute. Young's at 1.4. If they happen to both get in the same lineup, I don't care.
Yep. Yeah, that popped into my head. I had one lineup last night that had them both in it the last time, and I was wondering if that was something that you did. But I agree completely. I think they're two guys that can get there together or separately, and not really worry about it. Any love for Clint Capella? 26-minute projection, kind of just looks like who he is, but he's getting positive leverage on both sites and can be a useful piece from time to time.
Yeah, I don't totally know what to make of him. So things working against him is the fact that Okongwu's his backup. Some games, you still could get around 30 minutes from Capella. It's just really difficult to expect that on average. On average, I expect that you're just getting a lot of like 26, 22 splits between those two. Also working against him is he has seen a decrease in usage. And it's not that Clint Capella was ever a high usage guy, but he's efficient. Like he's scoring around the rim. So, all of his shots are coming at the basket. So going from like a 16% usage guy to 11, you are just taking points off the board there. And I think that is something that you could continue to see, given that you now have DeJounte Murray taking up possessions, whereas before maybe it was Trae Young throwing a lob to Clint Capella. So the decrease in usage rate is a little bit concerning for me. 18% rebounding percentage is still solid this year. He's averaging 0.94 DraftKings points per minute. So basically, at 5,200, I think he's cheap enough where if you want to gamble on him in some tournament lineups, that's fine. Maybe you get that 30-minute game and maybe he averages, a little bit better than his season average so far. But from a median projection standpoint, I think 5,200 is actually pretty much where he should be.
Pretty on point. Yep, makes sense. One last thing on the Hawks side of things. One of the non-official fantasy injury reports that I'm looking at here is saying that there's a chance Bogdan Bogdanovic makes his season debut today. Any thoughts about that? Is he on your radar at all? And if he did, what impact would that have downstream for some of the odds and ends from the Hawks? Anything?
So if he does, I'm assuming he doesn't play a ton, but he would take some combination of Justin or Aaron Holiday's minutes, I would think. Long term,
nobody major really probably coming off.
Yeah, I don't think he has too much of an impact though. Like he is someone that can handle the ball and play make and score, but I also just have a hard time thinking that he is going to be taking the ball away from Trae Young or DeJounte Murray. So I don't think he's going to have too much of an impact, at least early on, in terms of their rates. I think it's probably just that he's getting some of those bench minutes from one of the holidays and isn't really going to matter for DFS.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. Just one that I thought if he gets in there might come up later in the day. Looking at the Bucks side of things, no Pat Connaughton, Joe Ingles, Chris Middleton, but the general configuration of this Bucks lineup that we've had so far this season looks like Drew Holiday getting a decent amount of ownership, negatively leveraged to the extreme on the FanDuel slate. Not so much on DK. He's efficiently owned at a 13% rate on DK. He's 35% owned on FanDuel at 7,500 point guard, shooting guard eligible. So that's a major spot that's standing out. It's got upside, but it's got a lot of negative leverage on it. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on Drew Holiday, and then just Giannis. Obviously, we've got Bobby Portis on this team. A couple moving parts. What do you like from the Bucks?
Yeah, so Holiday is just like a really I think he's a solid play regardless of site, but it's just like a totally different play depending on which site you're talking about. On FanDuel, point guard and shooting guard eligible at just 7,500. So like you were saying, he's pulling 35% ownership. He's going over owned, but he still has like a 1 in 4 chance of being in the optimal lineup, which isn't something that you really want to ignore. On the DraftKings side, he's only pulling like 13% ownership, but he's 8,100 with only point guard eligibility. So on FanDuel, he's a good play just because he's a very good projected value. On DraftKings, he's not as good of a value, but he's also not getting as much ownership. And you're still talking about, a high upside player. So far this year, Holiday's averaged 1.07 DraftKings points per minute. But the thing that stands out is he's averaging 1.07 DraftKings points per minute on 39.4% true shooting. I don't care who you are, unless you're like, even Ben Simmons has a higher true shooting percentage this year than Drew Holiday. That's going to come up. And he's got a 31.5% assist percentage. He's averaging 2.1 steals per 100 possessions. He's averaging 1.8 blocks per 100 possessions. Like, he gets it done everywhere. If his shot starts falling, you're talking about a much, much more productive player than we've gotten so far. So I think there is a very high upside, or very high ceiling, I should say, on Drew Holiday. 24% usage rate, if I didn't already mention that. So the opportunities are there. His shot's just not falling. So I do like getting to Drew, given how productive he's been, even without being able to score.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think that's a good call out. And yeah, it's another one of those spots where I wish the field was going away from them because of the poor shooting, but I get why the field is there. And I don't think I want to run from that negative leverage. I think that's just a nice piece that's going to end up in a lot of my lineups on FanDuel, particularly with the MP, the ability to move them between point guard, shooting guard. We've got a lot of guys that move between the 2 guard spots and small forward to work with on the FanDuel slate, but he stands out as one of the stronger pieces. Like you said, the 1 in 4 chance of being optimal is pretty strong. Giannis, obviously sitting at a 31% probability, one of the big stars on the board today. What are you doing with Giannis? Are you seeing him any differently than the tools are? He's basically efficiently owned, big time chance of being optimal on both sides.
Yeah, no, I mean, as he should be. Highest projected guy on any slate that he's on. He's been ridiculous so far this year. I mean, he's been ridiculous for a long time, but 1.8 DraftKings points per minute so far, 36% usage, 34% assist percentage, 18.5% rebounding percentage, leads the team basically in every category. Bobby Portis slightly ahead in rebounding percentage off the bench, but Giannis looks great. His price tag came down slightly from yesterday. There is probably going to be a little bit more value than we had yesterday, at least as of the time Giannis's game started. So he should be a bit easier to get to. And as a result, he's projected for 24% ownership on DraftKings, as opposed to, I think we had him at like 10% yesterday. But certainly happy to get there. He looks fantastic. Behind him, Brolo at 5K and Bobby Portis at 5,400. I think either one is reasonable in tournaments. They're both pulling some ownership, probably around where they should be. Yesterday, you saw Portis get 25 minutes off the bench again. Lopez played 33. So you got a little bit more of them playing alongside each other against the Knicks, which was interesting and good to see. Against Atlanta, you could certainly see that again. Against the John Collins, Clint Capella, Okongwu front court, 2 of the 3, obviously. But playing, 2 relative bigs, you could certainly see some more Lopez and Portis alongside each other.
Yeah, Portis is a guy that's come up a little bit for me on FanDuel slates just with his power forward center eligibilities and where the cost has been. He's at 59 today. I'm curious to see if he comes up versus some of the other pieces that were in like the high 5s, low 6s, and how that comes together. Do you play, if you're going to one of those 2 guys, Portis or Lopez, do you play them in the same lineup as Giannis?
I think that's a really close call for me. I'm not entirely sure. Like, on the one hand, I don't want them in a bunch of lineups together. Yep. But on the other hand, I don't know if I care if they're in like a lineup or 2, because I do expect them to play a decent chunk of minutes alongside each other. It's just from like a true ceiling standpoint for Bobby Portis, he does have to kind of cut into Brook Lopez's minutes. Like the true ceiling game from Portis isn't 25 minutes, it's 30. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you're probably talking about fewer than 30 for Brook. So I don't, if I have to choose, I probably won't play them together.
Okay. Makes some sense. Any other odds and ends from this game, like Javon Carter's, George Hill's of the world, the guys pulling 20-ish minute projections? Anything value wise there?
Not really. I mean, Carter's 3,600, Hill's 3,800. They both absolutely suck from a point per minute standpoint. Grayson Allen pulling 7% ownership. He's up to 4,800. You're just going to have better value elsewhere. So, if you need a low owned guy that you're just praying happens to have a big game, and that's going to have a big game occasionally, but very infrequently, any of those guys are fine. But there's nothing that I can point to and like it makes me think they're going to do well.
All right, let's jump on to the next game. Then a little under 10 minutes to go in the show. 2 games to talk about. We may or may not do the Hall of Fame read. Depends on how much time we spend on Oklahoma City. 10-point dogs going into Dallas. 219 total. Obvious star caliber name on the Dallas side of the ball. Some moving parts on both sides here, of course. On OKC, nobody really blasting through the top of our probability numbers. Let's start off with OKC side of things. Anything standing out to you? Shea is coming in with a decent mean projection, but it's not like he's crashing through the top of the probability board. I do like the price at 9.3K on the DK board, though. Any love for Shea? And then what are you thinking about the rest of OKC here?
Shea being 4% owned at 9,300 without Giddey is absolute insanity. If that has to come up. I think that's too low. I think the optimal percentage is too low. I'm just a lot higher on Gilgeous-Alexander, I guess. Okay. Going back to the start of last season, 34.5% usage rate, 34% assist percentage, 1.43 DraftKings points per minute for SGA. He dealt with some foul trouble last game, so you get a really misleading rotation where he didn't even start the second half, came off the bench in the second half, still ended up playing 34 minutes. But yeah, I mean, this is a 1.4 fantasy point per minute guy without Giddey that is likely to give you 34 to 36 minutes at 9,300 and no ownership. If that somehow holds, I'm going to be playing a ton of SGA.
Okay. Standout smash spot. What about him? Same situation, obviously, at 10,000 on the FanDuel slate, shooting guard and point guard eligibility.
still
That
like him
type
a
of
lot
deal?
in tournaments. Obviously not as favorable a price tag, but yeah, still gonna like him a lot. He's getting 3% ownership
Yeah,
there. I'm
just nothing.
still happy to get to him. Like the only thing I guess working against him is you do have Giannis, who clearly is fantastic. You have Luka on the other side of this game, who clearly is fantastic. It's probably going to be tough to be playing a lot of those guys together. So, like, I could see if maybe you're just getting a lot of like Giannis plus Luka lineups, you lose out on SGA, and obviously you're
Mhm.
going to have to just be fine and live with that. But that ownership is really, really appealing.
Yeah, definitely. It stands out just for his general upside. I hadn't even thought about the Giddy part of it, but looking at some of the other pieces now, Trey Mann on the board, 30-minute projection, 5,500 point guard eligible on FanDuel, 56 point guard and shooting guard on DK. Maybe a little bit more value there, but again, not really smashing through the top of our probability numbers. Do you see any, any disagreements between guys like him or Darius Baisley, Kenrich Williams, any of these other guys? Dort?
I am really concerned that I'm going to end up with a lot of Oklahoma City exposure, and this is not going to be fun. Trey Mann at 5,600 here. I mean, obviously Dallas can just like absolutely destroy these guys. It's a 10-point spread. But within the context of the slate, 3 of the games have 10-point spreads. So it's not like I'm gonna it's not like I can really shy away too much from OKC, because I'm just gonna end up shying away from half the slate at that point. Trey Mann this year has been really productive, and I really like the rotations that they're running for him. They're staggering his minutes with SGA. So you're talking about like 12 to 14 minutes without him on the floor. Mann did only play 22 minutes last game, but that's not something I expect to be normal. He's got a 26.6% usage rate through his first 98 minutes this season, 1.13 DraftKings points per minute. Going back to the start of last year, overall, without Giddey on the floor, he's got about a 22% usage rate. If you take SGA off, it jumps to about 27.5%. So I do buy into this elevated usage rate for him for as long as Josh Giddey is out and they're staggering his minutes with SGA. At 5,600 and no ownership, I'm very happy to get the Trey Mann as well. I really hope ownership comes up, because I do not want to just be jamming OKC.
Yeah, it's always interesting when we're looking at these in the morning. We're like, man, I hope something changes so I don't have to play these
Yeah.
plays that look good to me right now. And yeah, I mean, Trey Mann, 27.1 FanDuel points in those 22 minutes the other day. Baisley for 4,400 at power forward, small forward on the FanDuel slate. He put up 29.3 in 22 minutes the other day. He's 4,000 power forward center on DK. So maybe some value there as well. What about the Dallas side of things? Obviously Luka standing tall at the top of the board, similarly priced to Giannis. There's Luka, and then there's everything else on Dallas. Does anything else stand out to you from Dallas?
So I actually hadn't seen Luka's price tag until right now. That's a lot.
It is.
12,500 on DraftKings.
Yeah.
Like, clearly you're going to be fine if you get there, but it's going to be really tough to prioritize him when he is $700 more expensive than Giannis. And then that's not even to mention that you have Tyrese Halliburton, Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You have all of these guards on the slate. He's only getting 8% ownership, so that's appealing. But man, it's going to be tough to get there at that price. At that price in general, and then when you consider that there's a lot of good options at his position, and he's more expensive than Giannis.
Probably a differentiated play on the FanDuel board at 11.6 point guard and shooting guard eligible, and then all that value that we're kind of seeing already on the FanDuel slate in terms of some stars just priced down. Like, I feel like it's an easier fit over there, and our numbers are showing that 21% optimal, 23% owned versus on DK 8% optimal, 8% owned.
Yeah, I would expect to get to a lot of Luka on FanDuel. I think I'm gonna have a lot of trouble on DraftKings.
All right, makes some sense. We got to hit the gas pedal here a little bit. Anything else jumping out to you from Dallas?
Nothing that really stands out. Dinwiddie at 5,800, Hardaway at 4,700. They're both fine. If you want to, so Christian Wood 7,500 projected for 3% ownership. If you're going to play a $7,500 Christian Wood off the bench, this is the type of spot I think you do it. Not when he is 10, 15, 20% owned. If you're gonna do it, I think you do it at 3% and just hope that you get that 30-minute Christian Wood game.
I think that makes a ton of sense. Yeah. And those are that's how you want to think about those plays, is just, when I'm going to those low end plays, those low expectation plays, let's do it when the whole field isn't there. So
yeah,
let's skip over the Hall of Fame. Everybody
one other thing,
just
somebody asked about Lou Dort in chat. Yeah, he looks fine. He's pulling 7% ownership on DraftKings, 5,500. You finally got him playing well last game. He gets a usage bump without Giddey, but he's behind Mann in terms of usage. Obviously, he's behind SGA. So you're talking about an inefficient shooter who's still the third scoring option here. I'm still going to get to some Dort, but I would rather get the Trey Mann.
Okay. Makes some sense. Good call. Let's jump directly into this next game. We're going to skip the Hall of Fame read. If you guys finish in the top three with our logo in your account, and there's more than 5,000 people in the contest, send us a tweet at Stokastic HOF and get yourself a free month of platinum. There it is.
The Hall of Fame read is just a bunch of pictures of Steve anyway.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. He's been crushing it. My God. Let's just dive into the Memphis side of things. We started the show off talking about it with John Morant potentially not going here. Tyus Jones picking up a massive ownership share on the FanDuel slate, massive ownership share on DK, and strong optimal rates here at 4,500 and 4,700 site to site. Are you seeing him the same way value-wise as a smash spot here?
Yeah, it's going to be really, really, really tough for me to get away from him. This is just one of those spots in NBA DFS where it's different than every other sport. Mm-hmm. You know, in football, if you tell me a running back is 60% owned, I don't really care who it is or what the situation is. He's, one hit away from just busting no matter what his salary is. But $4,700 Tyus Jones, you're talking about pretty much a fantasy point per minute guy that is likely to play north of 30 minutes here at only 4,700. He's going to be really tough for me to get away from. Looks absolutely fantastic.
Yep, absolute smash spot. And if I'm getting him, upwards of that ownership, I'm not overly concerned because it's just one of those lock-in value pieces. Any love for like the Bane Brooks pieces of this lineup, Santi Aldama, any of these other guys on the Memphis side?
Yeah, Bane in particular. He's taken a step forward this year in terms of his playmaking. He's shooting. I mean, he's always been really good at shooting, but his usage rate is up as well. Now you take John Morant out. Obviously, you don't have Jaren Jackson Jr. either. This offense should just run through Desmond Bane. And they've actually been staggering his minutes with Morant. And with the second unit, you were kind of getting like a 50-50 split where Tyus Jones initiates the offense and then Bane initiates the offense. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if you see Bane and Jones with staggered minutes here, and you're just getting point Desmond Bane with the second unit, or Tyus Jones with the second unit and point Bane with the first unit for a while. But either way, it doesn't matter. I expect a lot out of Desmond Bane here. Trying to quickly pull up what he's done without Morant on the floor since last year, but I can pretty much guarantee the usage rate goes up and he looks really good. 24% usage rate without Morant, 1.12 DraftKings points per minute. If you take off Jackson, you're going to get obviously a smaller sample size, but probably, yeah, if you take off Jackson as well, you get to 423 minutes, 27.6% usage, 20% assist percentage, 1.18 DraftKings points per minute. Desmond Bane looks absolutely fantastic to me.
Yeah, both him and Brooks are popping through the top of the board here really quickly because we are overtime already. Anything standing out to you from Utah? We do have some decent optimal rates. Looks like a lot of positive leverage. Didn't mean to leave us with no time to talk about this game, but
yeah, I mean, Utah's kind of just what they have been. Lauri Markkanen's playing really well. He's 6,900, getting 12% ownership. I don't think that there's any one guy on Utah that should be pulling a ton of ownership, but like it's one of these teams where the whole team should be getting some. Clarkson, Markkanen, Vanderbilt, Olynyk, Conley, they all look fine. Taylor Horton-Tucker's down to $3,700. He was $4,500 12 hours ago. So I do think that's an interesting spot, especially if they're missing anybody. Yesterday they didn't have Rudy Gay. I'm assuming he's still out. So that kind of solidifies minutes for Horton-Tucker. You didn't have Walker Kessler. Horton-Tucker at 3,700, I think, is a pretty reasonable value option.
Yeah, that one stands out on DK. 5,000 on FanDuel, no thanks. But definitely some moving parts and some usable pieces around the Markkanens, the Vanderbilts, the Conleys, and the Clarksons of the world there.
Well, one other thing quickly to mention there, just because I think it's interesting. Horton-Tucker, 3,700, pulling 15% ownership. Malik Beasley, 4,200, $500 more, pulling 2% ownership. There shouldn't be that big of a gap between those two. They're pretty much the same play, except one is $500 more expensive.
Yeah, and that 500, there's probably ways that you can find that on the board that we've been looking at all day. Guys, that brings us past the end of the show here. So we've got something coming up next. College football live before lock coming up next, 11 to 12. Then we've got the NFL strategy show at 1, MMA live before lock at 3, NBA deeper dive at 5, NBA live before lock at 6. Loaded day of sports. Make sure you're checking out PrizePicks. Make sure you go over to BetMGM and get your free $200. Can't beat that. Adam, anything to close us out here? Tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at ShipMyMoneyDFS. I'll have the DraftKings and FanDuel tournament plays video and the injury report video out in a little bit.
There you go. Great job, Adam. I've been Terry McBride. I'll have the baseball video up in a little bit. Thank you very much, guys. Good luck tonight.